my channel and welcome back to my budget series. This is part 2 of 2 parts. The first part was how I put the foundation in place and how I got things ready in 2018 for implementing my budget in 2019. So I encourage you to go and watch that video. I will link it down there. I will also do my best to try and remember to link it up in a card up here so you can watch that video first, because that is how I laid everything in place and got everything ready, figured out what my numbers were, and all of that really fun stuff. What we're mostly going to be talking about in this video is envelope and sinking funds. And those probably sound hideously boring, but they're really, really not. They are really two of the biggest parts of my budget and why my budget is working so well. So I'm going to explain what they are, the difference between them, how I look at them differently, and how I deal with them a little bit differently, understanding that everybody's going to have their own set of life circumstances, and that will determine how you deal with your money. So there's a lot of room for doing things different. It's like anything else in the world. What you do, you need to do what works for you. What works for me may not work for you, and that's fine, but this may be a good place for you to start, and then you can start adjusting as you put it into place. So I will have lots of resources linked down below, including the Dave Ramsey Useful Forms website, because I will talk a little bit about those once again, and a few other articles and resources about envelope funds, sinking funds, especially sinking funds, because that's a pretty interesting subject that I knew nothing about before I started all of this, and it has made a huge change in how I deal with my money and how I interact with my money. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the numbers. Hello everyone, welcome back to part 2 of Don't Be Stupid with Your Money, starring envelope funds and sinking funds. So we will get to those in a minute, but just as a quick recap, I spent all of 2018 tracking all of my spending, which you will have seen in my previous video, which I will link down below in the description box. So if you started out with that video, that gives you all the foundation that I was laying in place so that I could do my budget. So I'm tracking my spending, I'm coming up with all of these categories. So this was kind of a first pass at the categories, and then had a second pass at the categories, and finally came up with what is right now my final set of categories and line items for my monthly budget. And I used the Dave Ramsey forms for the monthly cash flow and also the lump sum payment form, which again I went into in the previous video. So if you go watch that, I will tell you about those 2 forms. I will also once again link that in the description box below so that you can go over there, because they are really, really useful. So I come up with all of these categories. Now you might be looking at this and wondering, what are these sinking funds and envelope items that you speak of? That's an excellent question. So before we get to that, let me tell you, as I was transitioning out of 2018 and we were heading into 2019, I had to think about what I was going to do to track my budget as I put it into place, as I actually started using said budget. So I had signed up for an email list for a website called The Simply Organized Home. It's run by Caitlin, and I got an alert from her. I got an email from her saying that she was releasing her 2019 budget binder. So she's done this for several years. So I took a look at it and decided that made sense. So let me show you. This is December of 2019, which obviously we're not quite there yet, but that is what let me zoom out just a little. You will see my tripod. I apologize, but I need a little bit more room. So I went ahead and bought it because I know how I am. I'm the kind of person who I act like I procrastinate because I'm trying to be a perfectionist, but really I'm procrastinating because I am just trying to put things off because I'm scared to put them into place. So I use that as an excuse to not do things. So I knew that if I tried to do something myself, like set up my own sheets or continued looking around, it would be 3 or 4 months into 2019 and I wouldn't have a budget. So I figured this made sense. Go ahead and buy someone's plan that they've already put into place. Buy something that's already put together for me so I don't have to come up with something. I don't have to reinvent the wheel, basically. So that's what I decided to do. So I will get into these in a little bit. But before we get there, you're wondering about sinking funds and envelope funds. And she, in all of the stuff, she had this little sheet with possible sinking funds and possible cash envelope categories. Now, in my mind, let me tell you what I think of as a sinking fund versus a cash envelope category or fund, and how I look at them in my brain. For me, a sinking fund is something that is a once or twice a year expenditure, or it's an occasional expense. Let me take you back to my categories. So I have a AAA membership that is due once a year. It is $54 as of the last time I paid it. So what I did was I took that $54, divided it by 12, because I have 12 months to save for it, and that came up with a $5 amount that I take out of every month's income. Same with Amazon Prime, that's a once a year thing. Auto insurance is every 6 months, so I divided that number by 6, and on down the line. So things like clothing I don't buy every month. I may go 3, 4, 5, 6 months without buying clothing, but I do buy it on occasion. So it was something that I did buy last year, so I took that average amount that I came up with and made that a sinking fund. So even though I may not buy clothes this month, I'm going to put that $20 into a sinking fund so that when I do go to buy clothes, let's say I go buy clothes in a few months and it's $75, instead of my budget taking a hit that month for $75, I have that money set aside already. So hopefully by the time I go out and spend that $75, I have at least $75, if not more, saved up for the expense. So that, in my mind, is what a sinking fund is. That sinking fund is actually something that is used by businesses. They say a construction company needs to buy a large piece of machinery that's $20,000. Goodness knows they're probably more expensive than that, but let's go with that. So instead of their budget taking a hit for that $20,000 all at once, let's say they know they need to buy it in 6 months. They take that $20,000, divide it by 6, and then they set aside that amount for 6 months, so that when it comes time to buy that $20,000 piece of machinery, they have that money put aside. We can use the same concept for some of our expenditures, things like those once a year expenses, or every 6 month or quarterly, or those things that you only buy occasionally. I don't buy personal care stuff every single month, but I put aside $65 every month so that when I go to buy personal care stuff, like my shampoo, conditioner, deodorant, things like that, I've got that money set aside. So I may not spend $65 on it every month, but I put that money aside so that I have it put, so that when I go to spend money, it is there for me. Whereas an envelope fund, I'll bring this back out. If you look at these cash envelope categories, it's things like groceries. I buy groceries every week, pretty much, sometimes more than once a week. I buy gasoline for my car mostly every week. There are occasional weeks that I don't have to if I'm not driving as much, but for the most part, every single week I have to buy gas because I drive to work 5 days a week. And of course I do other errands and things like that. Entertainment. You may want to consider that an envelope category because maybe you go out to the movies. I go out to the movies every so often with friends. I will buy the occasional magazine. So I consider, so for me, one of my envelope categories is entertainment. But these are just suggestions. I mentioned before that there are no budget police. They're not going to come arrest you if you're doing your budget wrong. You can decide that maybe one of these sinking funds works better for you as an envelope fund, and vice versa. Do what works best for you. Just do something. Start somewhere, and you can make adjustments as you go. And I have made some adjustments, and I will mention those in just a little bit. So that is where my sinking and envelope funds come in. I also have a few set aside as auto debits. They get their own line item, and they are, as you can imagine from the the category they're in, they are auto-debited. So they get their own line item, so I don't consider them one or the other. It's just an auto-debit thing. That includes my Netflix, which is, again, a monthly thing. And all of these auto-debits are monthly. These are things that happen every single month. So they get their own line item, and they're all part of the grand total for my spending. So that's where the sinking and envelope funds come in. That has been a huge change for me. Thinking about things instead of, and I don't know why I'm this way, but I would always get surprised every time the car insurance bill would come in the mail. I know when it's due. I know exactly which months my car insurance is coming due, but it was like it was a huge surprise every time that happened. Well, I knew it was happening, but for some reason my brain would just conveniently forget until the next 6-month round came around. So accounting for it every month has helped immensely with cutting down on the surprise, cutting down on the shock, and then the hit that my budget would take. This money is now being put aside. $42 out of my monthly paychecks doesn't feel like a whole lot. It certainly feels a lot less shocking than coming up with $250 all of a sudden when it comes due. It breaks it down into manageable chunks, and it doesn't feel quite as shocking to have that money coming out on a monthly basis and breaking it down into that monthly amount, as opposed to every 6 months having to cough up that money and going nuts every time. So this has helped in a huge way, looking at things on a monthly basis and breaking them down into a manageable amount, not thinking about it just as I'm going to deal with it when it happens and then I'm going to freak out or use a credit card or whatever. This is thinking ahead, which is huge. That's a huge part of a budget, is thinking ahead. That, I have savings now as a line item. I never used to be that way. Every single paycheck, there is an amount that comes out. No question, I don't argue with that. It happens. It's not something that I argue with. It's not something that is even negotiable. It happens. Okay, so we've got that. I bought the budget binder, so let me bring that back out and take you through a quick tour of what is going on with it. So first we have a calendar for the whole month, and I put down my paydays. I haven't yet gotten, since this is for December, I haven't yet gotten to the point of putting all of my bills in here, but I would put my bills a little bit more. Okay, so I've got my paydays, and I will go here and I will also put my bills that come due, whether those are auto-debited or paid manually. I have one bill that I pay manually, everything else is auto-debited. I will put them all here. I put them in red just because it makes it very easy to see. And there is where I will decide what paycheck is going to take care of which expenditures. I haven't done a whole lot of digging into the Budget Mom's budget by paycheck method, but I'm thinking about maybe getting her printable workbook for that and just see if that how it compares to this one, because I've really enjoyed the way this has worked, but I'll get into that in a little bit, how some of that spending has changed based on a paycheck by paycheck method. So put everything down there. And then I don't use this sheet as much. I do keep track of the bills that come due between the 1st and the 15th, and then the 16th through the 31st. And what I have seen from doing this is that most of my bills are front-loaded in the month, so almost everything is due in the first part of the month. That helps me decide which paychecks are going to pay for which things. Obviously, the paycheck that takes care of the mortgage is the one that takes the biggest hit, because my mortgage is my largest expenditure. So this helps me keep track of it. I don't use this sheet quite as much in the detail that she puts here, but it certainly is something that you could do. You can keep track of income up here. I could see where this could be really handy if you have multiple incomes to help you keep track of all of those. And then she calls this off the top. It's tithing and charitable giving, savings. Again, the savings for me is non-negotiable. It always goes here. So that comes out before anything else happens. And if you're saving for college, it could go here, investments, etc. So these are the things that are the non-negotiables that need to happen every time, no excuses. And then you put your bills down here, and then you can keep track of the stuff down here if you want to. I don't. It just doesn't work for me. It's not how I do it. Okay, now, as far as keeping track of the sinking funds, let me show you how it is set up in this particular Let's go. Let me go ahead and bring in a working sinking funds worksheet. Here's the one I'm using for September of 2019. Let me make sure that that's in the frame. Again, sorry about the tripod, but we're working with it. We're trying to figure out what works best. But anyways, so here we have all of my sinking funds. I have everything here listed, and I also have the amount. I always put the amount that comes out monthly just so I can have that really handily here. The starting amount, so this is where I ended up August at. As you can see, I went a little overboard on a few things, but I also got some extra, I did a little extra job over the summer, so some of that money was coming out of that. And I knew that, and I accounted for that, and I knew it was gonna happen. So, you know, do you sometimes go a little bit overboard in some things, even with a budget? Of course, and that's okay. But here there is a column for putting whatever you've put in. So this is the amount that I'm taking, that I would take out of one of my paychecks, typically the paycheck that doesn't have the mortgage coming out of it. I total all this up and I transfer all of that from the main account that I use where my paychecks go into, and transfer that to a totally different financial institution into a different, totally separate checking account. That has worked really well for me because that makes accounting for it really easy, and it means that I'm not mixing things up. So these sinking funds are in their own fund. They are in their own bank, their own account. They're not in where I use my cash envelope stuff from and savings and things like that. So that has been very helpful. I already actually had that second account, so if you, which really helps me a lot because unfortunately, the bank that my paychecks go into, they do not allow you to have more than one checking account. So I was trying to figure out how to take care of my sinking funds, and then I realized that I had this other checking account in a different financial institution. So that's been really helpful. Different debit card, everything. So really easy to keep track of. So on this sheet, you put how much you are adding, you put how much you are taking away. And let me show you. I just use a piece of paper. She actually added this to the budget binder a month or two into the year and had these sheets that you could print out, and I just keep track of it. I'd put sinking funds December 2019 and then go down through here. Let's say on the second day of the month, I go to Walmart and I buy some, I buy some shampoo, conditioner, deodorant, whatever. I'd keep track of that here, and I would put the date, the store, the amount, and what sinking fund it's going to be coming out of. And then I would keep a running tally all throughout the month. And then at the end of the month, sit down and go through, like, all the personal care stuff would get highlighted, added up, and transferred over here to the minus thing here, because I found that trying to keep track of each individual purchase here was getting confusing, because some of the things I will make multiple purchases on during the month. So it's easier to keep track of it in a running tally here, total everything up at the end of the month, and then transfer it over here. So you take your beginning balance, you add it, you take away anything you might have taken out, and you come up with your ending budget here. And this is where I keep, and then at the end of September or the beginning of October, I will go to the October sinking fund sheet, fill in everything, put my starting amount, and go from there. As I have mentioned before, I'm an analog person. I like to do things by hand. Of course, you could do Excel worksheets that do this. You could do probably formulas and things like that that will keep track of things for you. So do whatever works for you. I like writing things down. That's just the way I am. All right, cash envelopes. Let me show you what I am doing and also show you how some of my cash envelope stuff has changed a little bit. I don't use cash because I don't like cash. I feel many years ago my purse was stolen. I don't like the idea of carrying around cash. I want to be secure. To me, cash is just, if it gets lost or stolen, it's gone forever. So I just don't feel secure doing that. So I keep track of my cash envelope things here, even though I use a debit card. So we have categories here. So two of my cash envelope categories are gas and groceries. So I would start off, and I started off the year putting, I would write in gas, I'd put my monthly budget, and then I would keep track from the first through the end of the month here. What I was finding though was for these regular things, remember for me, envelope funds are regular expenditures. What I was finding was that for those paychecks that went from one month into another, it didn't make sense that I couldn't spend on the last day of the month, but I could on the next day, which was the first day of the next month, even though it's the same money, it was the same paycheck. So I did a little bit of digging around and found how to do some of your budgeting on a bi-weekly basis. I just searched bi-weekly budgeting or something like that. I will put some links down below. And what I found was that you can take your monthly budgeted amount, divide it by 2.167, and that will give you your bi-weekly amount. So that is what I started doing with my gas and groceries. Like I said, a budget is a living, breathing thing, and you're going to change things every so often because things may not be working, and that was one of the aspects that wasn't working for me, was trying to account for those bi-weekly things that I buy regularly. Sinking funds I can get because that's not something I'm doing all the time, but things like gas and groceries. And then I have recently decided to try doing that with two other categories, and that is entertainment and, I always forget, entertainment and eating out. I'm going to try doing those as a bi-weekly amount too and just see how things go. But for gas and groceries, that has helped a lot because that is coming out on a paycheck by paycheck basis. I'm buying, as I mentioned, I buy those things every week. Gas and groceries I buy every week. So I want to look at them as a bi-weekly amount. Just a little aside. As I mentioned, you need to, if you need to change things, change things. If they're not working, figure out how to make them work. And then one last thing as far as the paycheck to paycheck thing goes is this form that you can also find on the Dave Ramsey Useful Forms page, the allocated spending plan. This has been a magical thing for me. This has helped immensely. What this is basically is you take your pay period date, the income that you're making. So this is how to go from paycheck to paycheck. You manage your money. You can do this on a weekly basis, a bi-weekly basis, the 1st to the 15th, 15th to the 30th, if that's how you're paid basis, however it works for you. And this is especially helpful for those of us who make money on a bi-weekly basis. We get paid every other Friday or every other Wednesday or whatever. So you can take this form, you put your dates, your income, and then you just start going down. And these are the categories from your monthly cash flow. You move all the way down and you go back and forth until you get to the end. And because this has a lot of pages, it has like, I think 4 pages, and it just had more pages and more categories than I needed. So what I did was I made my own version, and I basically just took the categories that work for me and put them all on one page and made my own version of that so that it's a little easier for me to visualize. And I realized that I had already put my income here, so I took that out just because right now I'm not going to be putting that out for everybody to see. But anyways, that's what I do. I have my dates up here, and that's the date I get paid, and then going through the date before the next paycheck, I put the income here, and then I go down and put all of my line items that are due or coming out between these 2 dates. And that go back and forth until you get to the end. And so that is what I do all the way down through here, and then until I get to the end, at the bottom of whatever I've done. So I will go through. That has been a really great way for me to visualize from one paycheck to the next what's happening. How much am I going to have? Obviously, this one doesn't have my mortgage on it, but if it did, then it would be, it would look very different. I wouldn't be able to do as many things. This has all of the necessities. This has things like my groceries and the gas, the eating out, those bi-weekly things. And then I also have my sinking funds. My sinking funds total up $377 currently. So I went through and I took that out. Instead of doing the line items here, I just add them all up. It's just easier. And then lump sum here, and this is going to be my ending balance, provided nothing unexpected happens. So basically this has been a huge thing for me. This idea of looking at it on a bi-weekly basis, looking at how my money is moving from one paycheck to the next, really helps me visualize things in a way that makes it very concrete, because sometimes when you're looking at a budget, it can feel very nebulous, perhaps, and I think that's where writing stuff down is really super helpful. So As I mentioned, I'm going to link to the Dave Ramsey website down below, and so that you can get your own version of the allocated spending plan. I hugely recommend doing this because I think it is an exceptionally helpful form, and it has really helped me with figuring all this out. So I know that was a lot. I'm hoping that it was helpful. I'm hoping that it is useful. This has been, as I have mentioned multiple times through all of this, this has been a huge part of why things are working so well for me this year in a financial way that they haven't before, because I'm really keeping track of things. I'm keeping myself honest, and I'm making sure that I am keeping within those boundaries that I've set for myself, and that has changed so much in my life. So I hope this was helpful. So going to be useful to you, and as I mentioned, I'm going to be putting some resources down in the description box below. Okay, so that is how I implemented my budget this year. As you can tell, I have learned a lot. I have changed, and I've also changed some things from when I started in January, and I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind. One of the things that I was worried about, and it sounds like this is a common fear among people who are thinking about doing a budget or considering it or trying to put it into place, is what if it doesn't work? And it may not work. There may be parts of it that work and parts of it that don't, and don't be afraid to make changes. If things aren't working for you, then make a change. Make fewer categories, make more categories, change how you're tracking things, maybe move something from a sinking fund to an envelope fund and vice versa if it's not working. You can change things. It's not like you're taking a piece of granite and carving this budget into stone. You can make changes. It's okay to adjust things and do things differently if that's what you need to do. So that would probably be the biggest takeaway that I would tell you if you're worried or if you're nervous about it or you're thinking, what if I do it wrong? The only way you can do it wrong is by not doing one at all. I think that's really what it comes down to. You just need to start a budget and start putting it into practice. And then you figure out what's working and not working, and you deal with it from there, and that's fine. And also, here's something that I would suggest if you're really feeling overwhelmed or you still don't know where to start. I think there are 3 forms that everybody can start with that will help you get a good foundation in place and at least let you know what you're starting with and where to start from. And all 3 of those are from that Dave Ramsey Useful Forms page, which I will again link down below. The first one is the monthly cash flow sheet or set of sheets. Start with that, figure out where your money is each month. Then use the lump sum payment form to make sure you're accounting for all of those once or twice a year or quarterly payments and things like that you only deal with occasionally, so you don't forget any of those. And then finally, the allocated payment plan. So going from one paycheck to the next and seeing exactly where your money needs to go with each chunk of money that you are bringing in. Seeing how that works out and how much money you have to play with or how little money you might have to play with is a huge game changer. I found it extremely helpful, that allocated payment plan. I had never seen anything like that until I went to the forms page and started poking around and pulling up different forms and taking a look at them. That one has been a huge help for me. So those are the 3 forms that I think can be useful for anyone who is just starting a budget and doesn't know where to start. I think those 3 are essential. You can just start with those. Take 3 months of your bank statements or track your stuff for 3 months. 3 months is pretty much the baseline of what you should do. That'll give you a pretty good idea of where your money's going on a regular basis. You can do more. I wouldn't suggest doing less. The baseline that I've seen across the board has been at a minimum of 3 months. Take that, figure out those numbers, plug them into those forms, and start your budget, and just start doing it. And don't stress too much about it. Don't overthink it. Just start doing it, and you can make adjustments as you go along. So that's really my biggest takeaway, is just do it, as Nike would say, and don't stop yourself from doing it because you're too scared. That's what I did for years. I think I was just scared. I didn't know where to start. I felt overwhelmed, and so I just didn't do it at all. And I wish I had done it sooner. But that's okay. At least I'm doing it now. So that's what I would encourage you to do. Just go ahead and do it, and don't worry too much. I hope these have been helpful. Definitely like, share, and subscribe if you have found this helpful, and if you find other information about money and budgeting and all sorts of different life-changing things interesting. I would encourage you to do that. Please feel free to share this video or any of my videos with anyone that you think would find them useful and helpful. I know budgets seem to be a big deal with a lot of people, this whole idea of taking care of your money. So if these could help someone that you know, please feel free to share them with anybody. And yeah, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch. And please let me know down in the comments what has been helpful for you with your budget, or share any tips or tricks. Ask questions if you feel like it. I may be able to answer them, and if I can't, I will hopefully be able to find out something from somebody else who knows more about this than I do. Thanks so much, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.